In my Shakuhachi Introduction series, we've already covered a wide range of topics: a suitable beginner's instrument, how to make a tone, playing the basic notes and playing kan, the basics of notation, and we've even had a look at a somewhat more advanced topic, how to play meri and kari. But to learn playing shakuhachi, it is not enough to study all these topics in isolation. You also have to bring them together and practice playing music. Don't get me wrong, I think the best way to make progress on the shakuhachi is to work hard on one aspect, for example, tone quality. Then, when there is noticeable progress, you move on to another aspect where you think you should improve, say, the pitch of tsumeri. After that, maybe it's playing high notes, and so on. But all these skills really are interdependent, and improving in one area can actually mean that you're getting a bit worse in other areas. For example, when you find a way to play louder, it's quite possible that your pitch control is not as good anymore, or your sound gets a bit rougher. My mental image for this is that there is a blob of skills, and the goal is to make this blob bigger. So you pull at one point to add to your skills, then you take another bit and pull on that. And slowly over time you get from a small blob to a slightly less small blob. As I already mentioned when I talked about how to practice, see the link up here? It is important to do technical exercises in isolation, but it is also crucial to follow it up with the second step of just playing the instrument and not thinking about technique anymore. In the second step, all the different techniques are integrated and combined. I came across this point again when I was working on my incrementally growing shakuhachi playing guide, working title How to Shakuhachi. You know, I'm a bit silly. Which is one of the benefits of the Patreon page I'm currently starting. This guide is not a complete book, at least not yet, but rather an incrementally expanding document with basic instructions and scores. The overall idea is to turn the scripts of the videos like this into sections and then over time integrate them into a coherent document. By the way, if you want to support my activities here on YouTube, please check out my Patreon page. Pledging just a few euros, pounds, dollars, yen, or whatever your currency makes a really big difference for me. And it will help me continue making these videos. Also, the usual call.
Once again, remember to accent the like button, vibrato the subscribe button.
Thanks to Seth, I really appreciate your support. Okay, enough self-promotion. So a couple of weeks ago I started putting together the first sections of this playing guide. I've so far used existing scores and books for teaching beginners, but none really matches closely the way I like to proceed. So now I've started to work on some useful exercises that gradually introduce new ideas. I would also like to say that this is my current thinking. If you have ideas or suggestions on good exercises to start out, please let me know. So these exercises that I'll be talking about in a minute are useful first exercises and a useful typical progression in my view. I will go over these quite quickly, but of course each one of these needs many repetitions and a few hours, days, weeks until you should move on to the next step. And as always, the best is to have a teacher who gives you feedback on your progress. I'd also like to encourage you not to just use the ones I'm showing here, but to make up your own versions and your own variations of this. Alright, time for me to finally shut up and do some playing. Experience shows that the easiest note to get started with is to play re, so the bottom two holes are open, and the notes above it. When you start out, it's a bit difficult to have enough air, so in these first exercises, the way I wrote them down, I left some time for taking in breath as well. So rhythmically, you'd play for 3 beats or something in that area, and then you take in the breath for 1 beat. So if I play this the way it's notated here, as I already mentioned, I made a few videos on notation and on rhythm on shakuhachi, so please just refer to those. I won't go through all these details here again. Once you get a bit more familiar with these notes, the next note to add to the mix would be tsu, so where you just have the bottom hole open. In the second exercise, that's exactly what's done. You can play all these exercises much faster, much slower, with a different rhythm. As I say, please make your own variations and your own versions of these. As a next progression, it makes sense to try to play exercises like this without explicitly notating for taking in the breath. So just play the whole thing legato or in one breath, if you can. So the third exercise, for example. As you noticed, I took a breath. It's absolutely no problem as long as you stay within the rhythm. The way I notated it here is that instead of having 4 beats for every note or 3 beats plus 1 beat for taking in breath, here it's just 2 beats. So overall, it makes sense to get slightly faster in these exercises as well. Then the fourth exercise that I have here is pretty much the same, except that I'm throwing a bit more of tsu into the mix, because tsu is a bit more of a difficult note. So this fourth exercise is For the fifth exercise, we're also using ro, so all holds closed. This note is a bit more difficult than tsu, but after having a few exercises under your belt, I think it's a good point to add ro as well. And as with the change from the first 2 exercises to the second 2 exercises, here I indicated it so that you just play 1 beat. So maybe it's a good idea to play these exercises even a bit faster. So the fifth exercise. And the sixth is pretty much the same, except again, I throw in more ro into the mix. So plus also for the first time, it's not just going up and down by 1 note, but there is the change from chi to tsu. So you skip the re, so to speak, in the middle. As I said earlier, for me, the best way to increase your skills slowly, bit by bit, is to just add 1 bit into the equation, so to speak, for each exercise. So this is the way I'm thinking about this progression here. Then in exercise number 7, I started notating in 8th notes. So no need to rush here, play this as slowly as you like. But it's a good exercise as well to get more familiar with this kind of notation where you have this vertical line through the notes. So the 7th exercise. One thing I forgot to mention before I played was that at the end of the phrase there is a quarter note. So this is the first time that in these exercises there are 2 different note values that you have to play, 8th notes and quarter notes. You may have also noticed that all the exercises don't have any repeating notes. And this is because for playing shakuhachi, repeating notes actually needs a bit of practice as well. Because on the shakuhachi, you just quickly lift a finger to repeat a note. And so on, instead of the Western system where you use tonguing to do the same thing. Again, this is not the point to go into detail about repetitions and ornamentations, but this is a good point, I think, in this progression to start practicing repetitions as well. So in this exercise here, there is 1 note, re, repeated twice, then there is tsu, repeated twice, re, repeated twice, and so on, and a rest between these repetitions. So I find it helpful having these 1 beat rests in between so that you can start focusing on the next part of this exercise. Another aspect of repetitions is that from a notational perspective, there is a special symbol. This one, this one here. So an alternative notation, or a more common way of notating this, is this one here. But it's basically the same what I just played. A useful way to read this is that the first one, which is indicated by the katakana symbol, is the note that you play, And this little hook, this repetition mark, is when you do the finger lift. So this would be a direct correspondence of what's notated to what you're actually doing with your fingers. Now we're finally at a point where we can play our first real piece. And a very commonly used first piece for shakuhachi is Hino Maru no Hata. This refers to the Japanese national flag. So the song is this. I also have one of my play-along videos that uses this song, so maybe that's a good resource for you as well to use in your practice. I went over all of this very, very quickly, but I hope this gave you an idea of what a useful way of looking for next things to integrate into your playing is. It doesn't necessarily have to be this exact sequence, but I found in my teaching, in my own learning, that doing it this way is the least stressful because if you're learning shakuhachi, there is just a lot of things you have to keep track of at the same time, and it's really very confusing. So I hope this gave you a few useful ideas. As I said, if you like the scores, you can get them if you subscribe to my Patreon. Every little support there is really greatly appreciated because I really like making these videos, but I have to find a way to pay for it too. So your help would be greatly appreciated. As always, I hope this was useful. If you have different ideas, please leave me a comment. At the moment, I'm really looking for good ways to make first exercises so to make it easy for beginners to start playing. So if you have any ideas, please let me know. Thanks for watching until the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Pledging just a few euros. Pledging just a few. By the way,